Okay, let's unpack this. You pour your heart and soul, incredible talent, countless hours into a new product, a new venture, and it just
Yeah.
fails. Poof,
Mm.
vanishes.
Yeah.
Why? Why does so much human creativity and potential seem to just evaporate in the marketplace?
It's a brutal question, isn't it? You build something you're convinced people need, you execute the plan,
Yeah.
and reality just doesn't line up. It's one of the most frustrating experiences, really.
Absolutely, and grappling with that exact frustration is what this deep dive is all about. We're exploring excerpts from a book that offers a fundamentally different map for navigating that uncertainty, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
Right, and Eric Ries knows this pain firsthand. He shares his background, as a co-founder and CTO who experienced that cycle of working incredibly hard on products that ultimately didn't succeed.
Oof. Yeah.
And that personal experience fueled his mission, which he states pretty clearly, to improve the success rate of new, innovative products worldwide.
And you know you're getting into something significant right from the jump. The endorsements alone are powerful, calling it the roadmap for innovation, suggesting it could help create the next industrial revolution.
Must read.
Yeah, must read.
Yeah.
It really makes you lean in and ask, okay, what's in this book that makes people say that?
Well, it immediately challenges some core assumptions. One of the first things it does is redefine what a startup even is.
Okay.
It's not just two guys in a garage building an app anymore. The definition offered is a human institution designed to create new products and services under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Extreme uncertainty. That's the key differentiator, isn't it?
Totally.
Because that's why traditional management methods, careful planning, detailed strategies, extensive market research, often fall flat for startups.
Right. Those methods assume you understand the market, you know who the customer is, but a startup, by definition, is searching. They don't know those things yet.
You can't build a perfect plan when you don't know the territory. It's like trying to navigate fog with just a map.
Precisely. You're operating in that fog. Relying solely on a detailed, rigid plan in that environment is incredibly risky. It's often just wrong.
So if you're in that fog,
Mhm.
how do you move forward without just crashing? The book lays out 5 core principles that underpin the entire lean startup approach.
Yeah, these are the foundations.
They are. 1, entrepreneurs are everywhere. 2, entrepreneurship is management, but a new kind.
A very different kind, yeah.
3, validated learning. 4, build, measure, learn. And 5, innovation accounting.
And the truly central, almost revolutionary idea is captured in that third principle, validated learning.
Okay.
A startup's fundamental purpose isn't just to build a product or even just to make money right away. It exists to learn.
Learn what specifically?
Learn how to build a sustainable business. That's the goal.
Okay, learn how to build a sustainable business. That makes sense. But the validated part is crucial, isn't it? How is this different from just, learning stuff as you go?
That's where the scientific method comes in. This learning has to be validated, like rigorously, through experiments.
Experiments.
Yeah, it's about turning assumptions, because that's what they are, assumptions into hypotheses and testing them, really testing them.
Got it.
This validated learning becomes the core unit of progress. It replaces traditional metrics like being on time or on budget, which frankly are meaningless if you've built something nobody wants.
Right. You can be perfectly on schedule delivering. Nothing useful.
Exactly. This is how you systematically eliminate the waste of building the wrong thing.
So instead of are we on schedule,
Yeah.
the question is, are we learning what we need to learn?
Exactly. And are we learning it efficiently? Are we learning it fast enough? A great illustration of this, which Ries shares from his own experience, is IMVU.
Oh, yeah, his company.
Right. Their initial vision was huge virtual worlds, avatars, commerce. Their strategy felt rock solid, targeted the instant messaging market, ride the network effects.
Which sounds brilliant on paper. Get into a huge existing market, network effects. What could go wrong?
Well, they built what he describes as a terrible minimum viable product, the MVP.
Terrible. He actually calls it that.
Oh, yeah. Buggy, unstable. They shipped it early, even charged for it, and changed it constantly, sometimes dozens of times a day.
Dozens of times a day. That's intense. What happened when they launched this terrible MVP?
Agonizingly little. As Ries recounts, basically nothing. Nobody tried it enough to even find the bugs. It was painful.
Ouch.
They tried to use metrics like daily customer interactions and small revenue targets like $300 a month, then $350, etc., as a scorecard.
Okay, trying to find some sign of life.
Exactly. But despite improving the product daily, shipping constantly, those metrics were stubbornly flat. They were building and building, but progress just wasn't happening by their own measure.
And that's where the validated learning lifeline came in. How did they figure out what was going wrong?
They finally started doing intense customer interviews, getting out there, talking to people, and this is where they started getting that validated learning that completely overturned their initial assumptions.
Like, what did they learn?
Well, first, customers didn't want an IM add-on. They wanted a standalone network. They also learned customers weren't afraid to switch IM programs. And crucially, customers wanted to try it alone first before inviting friends.
Alone first for a social product. That
Yeah.
sounds totally counterintuitive.
Right. It completely blew up their network effect strategy. They assumed people would bring their friends immediately. Nope.
What else did they find out?
Perhaps the biggest surprise was why people were interested. It wasn't just about talking to existing friends with avatars. They specifically wanted to make new friends using the avatars.
New friends?
Yeah. The anonymity and identity play that the technology enabled was something customers unexpectedly valued. That was the hook.
Wow. So their elegant strategy, built on Metcalfe's law and the IM market, was just wrong.
Completely wrong. Blown apart by what actual customers did and wanted. That painful discovery, that was the validated learning.
So the failure, the flat metrics, wasn't just failure, it was data.
Exactly. That was the real progress, realizing the assumptions were flawed. They then designed specific experiments to test these new hypotheses.
Like the split test.
Yeah, they ran a split test, positioning the product as avatar chat versus 3D instant messaging.
Okay.
Avatar chat resonated much better, got more clicks, even led to more paying customers.
Huh. Just changing the name.
It's about finding what connects. They also had failed experiments like paying customer service agents to act as virtual tour guides inside the product.
How'd that go?
Zero impact on engagement. Another learning experience, right. Didn't work. Move on.
Okay, so many experiments, many failures, a major pivot away from the IM add-on idea,
Big one, yeah.
and then they landed on the making new friends online core value, building features around that finally drove engagement and growth.
Right, and that iterative process, finding what actually worked through testing, that's the true start of productivity he talks about.
Systematically figuring out the right things to build, not just building things right.
Exactly. It's the opposite of achieving failure, perfectly executing a plan to build the wrong thing. It puts validated learning first.
It's such a stark contrast to traditional metrics where you
Yeah.
celebrate being on time and on budget, even if the product misses the mark entirely.
Totally. Ries describes feeling like he was just keeping people busy and spending money, with the only comfort being the knowledge they were learning from wrong turns. Validated learning provides a much more meaningful yardstick. Are we actually learning how to build a business here?
Another great example that cuts through the idea of just doing market research is the early days of Zappos. They didn't just survey people about buying shoes online, did they?
No surveys. Tony Tsai went low-tech. He went to local shoe stores, took pictures of shoes, put the pictures online,
Okay.
and if someone ordered, he'd then go buy the shoe at retail and ship it himself.
That sounds incredibly inefficient as a business, like zero margin.
As a business, yes, completely unscalable, but as an experiment, as an MVP to test the core hypothesis, will people actually buy shoes online? It was brilliant. Okay. Testing the actual behavior.
Right. And in doing so, he didn't just get quantitative data orders or lack thereof. He got qualitative learning firsthand about the entire customer interaction payments, returns, customer support questions. You learn so much more doing it than just asking about it.
That kind of empirical testing is invaluable compared to just hypothetical survey data. Makes sense.
Absolutely.
So, how do you turn this idea of validated learning and rapid experimentation into a repeatable process? That brings us to principle number 4, the core engine, the build, measure, learn feedback loop. This is the fundamental activity of a startup.
It is. It's the loop you live in. You take an idea, you build it into a product, or maybe just an experiment.
Build,
Then you measure how customers actually react to it. What do they do?
measure,
And then you learn from that data whether to pivot, change direction, or persevere.
learn, build, measure, learn.
And the goal, the big goal, is to accelerate getting through this loop as fast as humanly possible. Faster loops mean faster learning. Ries uses the metaphor of a steering wheel for this loop, right? As opposed to relying on a detailed map drawn beforehand.
Exactly. The map is your detailed business plan, full of assumptions about a landscape you haven't actually seen yet.
Right, the fog.
Yeah, the fog. The steering wheel is the BML loop, constantly adjusting your direction based on real feedback from the road, from your customers. It lets you navigate the fog.
This is how you avoid driving straight off a cliff, which is that achieved failure thing, perfectly executing the wrong plan.
Exactly. You steer based on reality, not just the map.
And the key to accelerating that loop is the minimum viable product, the MVP. We hear this term everywhere now. What's the lean startup definition? Is it just the smallest thing you can build?
Not necessarily the smallest, no. That's
Yeah.
a common misconception. It's the version of the new product that lets a team collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers
Okay, maximum learning.
with the least amount of effort. It's the fastest way to get through one cycle of the build, measure, learn loop to start that critical learning process.
Okay, fastest way to learn. That makes sense. Like the Groupon example. That wasn't a big tech build initially.
Perfect example. Before building a complex platform, they tested the core value proposition with just like a simple WordPress blog, a handmade PDF voucher,
A PDF, really?
yeah, and a daily email offering a local deal like a pizza coupon. That was their MVP. Incredibly simple, maybe even crude.
But it worked to test the core idea.
Exactly. It allowed them to test, will people actually buy something collectively this way? Will merchants participate? And that basic test, that super simple MVP, led to record-breaking growth later on.
That really challenges the traditional idea that you need a polished, high-quality product before you show it to anyone. Doesn't putting out something minimal or buggy feel wrong? Doesn't it hurt your brand?
It definitely feels counterintuitive, yeah. Traditional product development standards value perfection, polish. But MVPs are about testing assumptions about what customers actually value and doing it early.
Before you spend a fortune building the wrong polished thing.
Right. Think about early Craigslist. Incredibly simple. Looked terrible by many design standards back then, but customers valued its function, its directness.
Yeah, it just worked for what people needed.
Or IMVU's teleporting avatars. Ries mentions the team felt it was lame building it, technically simple, but customers liked it because it solved the problem of getting around their virtual world quickly. It wasn't about elegant navigation code, it was about solving the user's problem fast.
So the point isn't to build something bad on purpose, but to build just enough to test a critical assumption about what value customers perceive or how they behave.
Precisely.
And if the MVP fails because it's too hard to use, that's also validated learning. It tells you that you need better design or usability for this market.
Exactly. You learn that fast, cheaply, before investing years and millions polishing something fundamentally flawed. The fear that you might alienate early customers or damage your brand with an MVP is real, but it's often less significant than the much bigger risk of building something perfect that nobody wants.
Okay, but what about competition? Doesn't showing your minimal idea to the world just make it easy for a big company to steal it? That's a common fear.
It is a common fear, but the book pushes back on this pretty strongly. Ries argues that it's surprisingly hard for a startup to get noticed at all, let alone have a big company swoop in and steal its core idea effectively.
Really? It seems like big companies have all the resources.
They do, but they also have inertia, bureaucracy, existing priorities. Ries even suggests a kind of thought experiment. Try actively getting a product manager at a big, established company to steal one of your lesser ideas. Call them up, write a detailed memo, spell it out for them.
And the point is, they probably won't, or they can't execute on it quickly.
Often, yeah, it's that they're overwhelmed, their internal processes are slow, or it just doesn't fit their strategic roadmap or quarterly goals. Big companies aren't usually lacking for ideas. They're challenged by prioritization, internal politics, and execution speed on new things.
So a startup's advantage is its agility in searching for a sustainable business model, not necessarily hoarding a secret idea.
Exactly. The risk of building something nobody wants is almost always greater than the risk of your specific idea being stolen and perfectly executed by a competitor before you even figure out if it works.
Okay, so you're running these experiments, building MVPs, going through the build, measure, learn loop. How do you measure whether you're actually making progress? Traditional accounting or metrics clearly don't work well here.
Right. And this brings us to principle number 5, innovation accounting. You need a new way to measure progress when you're operating under that extreme uncertainty. The big danger is getting seduced by what are called vanity metrics.
Vanity metrics.
Yeah.
Sounds like something that makes you look good, but isn't actually meaningful.
That's exactly it. Gross numbers going up, total users, total downloads, maybe even total revenue in the very early days. They feel good. They look great on a chart in a board meeting.
Sure, up and to the right.
Yeah. But they often don't tell you why they're going up or if your work, your experiments, your product changes are actually driving that change.
You've probably been in that meeting where marketing claims growth was from the latest PR push. Engineering says it was the new feature they shipped.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no clear data to resolve it because you're just looking at the total number.
Exactly. Vanity metrics make it almost impossible to establish cause and effect. They don't show you if your experiments are moving the needle on the actual drivers of your business model. Are people engaging more? Are they converting better? Are they sticking around longer?
So the alternative is actionable metrics. How are they different? What makes a metric actionable?
They focus on specific customer behavior, and they demonstrate clear cause and effect. Instead of page hits, you measure distinct visitors performing a key action. They use tangible units, people, conversions, retention rates that you can understand and act upon.
Okay.
And critically, the reports based on these metrics should be simple, accessible, and widely available so the whole team understands what's happening and why.
Like the Grocket example. Emailing results daily.
Yeah, emailing split test results to everyone daily. That transparency means everyone sees the impact of experiments directly, no hiding behind vanity numbers.
Split testing or A/B testing. That's the core technique for getting actionable data, right? Showing different versions of something to different sets of users and measuring the difference in behavior.
Yes. It's an old direct mail technique, actually, but super powerful when applied to digital products and services. Grocket had that great example testing lazy registration versus required registration up front.
What did they find? I think you mentioned this.
Yeah, they found customer behavior. The key actions they cared about later on was basically the same, regardless of whether registration was required up front or delayed.
Wait, really? So adding that friction didn't hurt their important outcomes?
Correct, which was totally counterintuitive, right? Everyone assumes friction is bad. But the data showed it clearly for their product and audience. That told them the customer's decision to really engage wasn't about that initial sign-up friction. It was driven by something else entirely, maybe their marketing message, the perceived value proposition.
That's incredibly valuable learning you'd completely miss if you just looked at a gross sign-up number.
Absolutely. That's actionable. It tells you where not to focus your optimization efforts.
Fascinating. So these early MVPs, even if the numbers are initially terrible, they provide the first crucial learning milestones. By giving you a baseline for these actionable metrics, conversion rates, sign-up rates, retention, whatever's key to your model.
Exactly. You establish the baseline reality. Even if it's bad, it's real. And then innovation accounting provides the framework to see if your subsequent experiments, your iterations, are actually improving those baseline metrics.
So you can clearly see if you're making progress on the things that matter.
Right. If those core actionable metrics aren't improving, even if total users are ticking up slightly due to random factors or maybe some unsustainable marketing spend, you're not making validated progress towards a sustainable business. You might just be spinning your wheels.
This rigorous measurement and learning process leads to a really critical decision point you mentioned. Pivot or persevere. How do you know which one to do? It sounds like a huge decision.
It is huge. After running experiments through the build, measure, learn loop, you evaluate the results against your core hypotheses. If your key assumptions, your leap of faith assumptions, are consistently proven false by customer behavior.
The data just isn't supporting the idea.
Right. Then it's time to make a major change in strategy that's a pivot. You keep one foot anchored, maybe in the overall vision or the technology, but you change a fundamental aspect of your strategy, your target market, your value proposition.
Okay. And if the data validates your hypothesis?
Then you persevere. You double down on that path, keep optimizing, keep iterating along that validated trajectory.
So the whole startup is essentially built on these leap of faith assumptions, these hypotheses about how the world works or how customers will behave.
Yes, absolutely. And the two most critical ones are usually the value hypothesis. Does this product actually create value for customers?
Yeah.
Will they use it or pay for it? And the growth hypothesis, how will new customers discover and adopt this product?
And you have to be wary of just relying on analogies, right? Like we're the Uber for X or something.
Oh, definitely. Flawed analogies based on past successes in totally different contexts or markets can be really dangerous. You need empirical testing in your specific context with your target customers.
This sounds a lot like the Toyota principle, Genchi Gambutsu, go and see, getting out of the building and seeing the reality firsthand.
It's very much aligned with that spirit, yes. For Toyota, it might be about understanding the factory floor processes or how customers use a minivan for incremental improvement, like with the Sienna development. For a startup, that early contact with customers using an MVP is absolutely crucial because it immediately highlights which of your leap of faith assumptions are the riskiest and need urgent testing. Where is the biggest gap between your plan and reality? That's what you need to find out fast.
Okay, once you've learned and hopefully found something that creates value, validated that hypothesis,
Yeah.
how does sustainable growth actually happen? Where does it come from?
The book argues that sustainable growth comes primarily from the actions of past customers driving new customers. It's not just about one-off marketing campaigns.
Okay, like a virtuous cycle.
Exactly. It outlines 4 primary engines of growth that power this. They are word of mouth, the viral engine, the paid engine, and the sticky engine. Each is like a different type of combustion engine with its own measurable inputs and outputs, its own physics.
Like the viral engine that's driven by the viral coefficient, K1.
Yes. The viral coefficient, K, is the average number of new customers each existing customer successfully invites or brings in. If that K is greater than 1.0, you get exponential viral growth. Think early Hotmail or Facebook.
And products with strong viral loops often avoid direct charging, right? Because friction kills virality.
Exactly. Any friction in the sign-up or sharing process can significantly dampen that viral coefficient, so they often rely on indirect monetization later.
Okay, what about the paid engine? That sounds more traditional, like advertising.
It is, but viewed through a specific lens. It's about reinvesting the margin you make from each customer. You look at your customer lifetime value, LTV, how much profit a customer generates over their entire relationship with you, and subtract the cost per acquisition, CPA, how much you spent to get that customer.
LTV minus CPA, the margin.
Right. You grow by reinvesting that margin to acquire more customers. Growth accelerates if you can increase LTV, get more value per customer, or decrease CPA, acquire them more cheaply.
But CPA tends to rise over time, doesn't it, as channels get crowded?
It often does, yes. So relying purely on the paid engine usually requires a differentiated ability to monetize specific customer segments very effectively, or some kind of competitive advantage in customer acquisition, like IMVU figuring out unique payment methods for users who didn't have credit cards.
Got it. And the third one, the sticky engine. That sounds like it's less about bringing in floods of new people and more about keeping the ones you have.
Precisely. Growth here comes from having high customer retention and very low churn, customers leaving. You focus on making the product indispensable, deeply engaging, so users stick around for a long time. Think subscription businesses or products deeply embedded in workflows.
This leads to a kind of counterintuitive lesson, doesn't it, if you're using a sticky engine model and you're not growing?
Right, the temptation is always get more new users, but the real problem might be churn. The counterintuitive solution might be to invest heavily in making the product more engaging and valuable for your existing users to reduce churn, rather than just pouring more money into acquiring new users who will also churn out quickly.
You can acquire lots of users, but lose them just as fast, appearing stuck despite high activity at the top of the funnel.
Exactly. Fixing the leaky bucket is key for the sticky engine.
And the book makes a strong point that successful startups usually focus on mastering one primary engine initially, right? Trying to do all 4 is too much.
Yes, absolutely. Focus is critical. Trying to build a viral loop A&D, a paid acquisition machine A&D, a super sticky product all at once usually leads to doing none of them well. You figure out which engine fits your product and market, and you tune that engine.
And the specific metrics for each engine, viral coefficient, LTV-CPA ratio, churn rate, they provide a rigorous way to assess if you're approaching product market fit.
Yes. Product market fit isn't just a fuzzy feeling. It shows up in the metrics of your chosen growth engine starting to work reliably and efficiently. If the engine is humming, your key metrics for that engine are improving consistently.
David Benetti's story with Vodafone is mentioned as a great illustration of this iterative pivoting, driven by metrics and learning. He went from an 8-month MVP cycle down to just 1 month eventually.
It's a fantastic example. He started with a social network idea for civic engagement, probably aiming for a sticky or viral engine, but the metrics just weren't moving enough. Engagement wasn't there.
So pivot time.
Right. He pivoted to a more transactional model at TUGov, maybe thinking about a paid engine focus, which had better initial numbers, but ultimately not enough paying customers to scale. So another pivot towards becoming more of a platform.
Each pivot was a big strategic shift, but always anchored to that core goal of increasing civic participation. The metrics acted as the guide, right? showing when a particular strategy just wasn't working well enough.
Exactly. And this helped him avoid getting trapped in what Ries calls the land of the living dead.
Still living dead.
Yeah, where a company has just enough success, maybe some users, maybe a little revenue to survive, pay the bills, but there's no real growth, no path to a big sustainable business. It just drains energy and resources slowly. Pivoting decisively based on data helps avoid that fate.
And that acceleration in the MVP cycle he achieved 8 months down to 1 month, that wasn't just about code reuse, was it?
No, he emphasizes that. It was the acceleration of learning. He often had to discard significant parts of the product with each pivot, but the validated learning about the market, the users, and what didn't work compounded. That allowed him to make decisions and build the next experiment much faster in subsequent cycles.
It's a stark contrast to a previous waterfall project he'd been on, which failed spectacularly after delivering a great product a year late that nobody bought.
Right. The lean approach forced the learning up front.
This scientific, iterative approach,
Yeah.
it sounds great, but sometimes feels like it's just for tiny tech startups in Silicon Valley. But the book argues entrepreneurs are everywhere, right? Even inside big companies, calling them intrapreneurs.
Yes, that's Principle 1 revisited, and the SnapTax story at Intuit is the classic example proving this isn't just for garage startups.
Intuit, maker of TurboTax, QuickBooks, a big, established, successful company.
Exactly, a Fortune 1000 company. Their founder, Scott Cook, was actually frustrated by their poor return on innovation despite being very well managed by traditional standards. He realized their old management methods were simply inadequate for fostering truly new innovations, not just improvements.
So how did they apply lean principles inside a giant like Intuit?
They created a small, dedicated team, just 5 internal people, regular salaries, regular offices, nothing fancy to develop SnapTax, a mobile-first tax product.
Okay, a small internal team.
And this team operated explicitly using lean principles. They tested core assumptions empirically through experiments with real customers. Could people reliably scan W-2s with their phone camera? What about taking photos of documents? Could they actually do the entire tax return just on the phone?
So they based development on customer behavior and validated learning, not just a predefined feature list handed down from management.
Exactly. It was hypothesis-driven development.
What was the key enabler for them to do this within a big company structure? That often seems like the hardest part.
The crucial factor, according to the story, was that senior management deliberately created an island of freedom for the team.
An island of freedom?
Yeah. They gave the team scarce but secure resources and, crucially, independent authority to run their own experiments and make decisions based on data without needing layers of approval for every little test.
Ah, autonomy.
Right. This fostered what Ries calls entrepreneurs who run and learn, rather than internal politicians who spend all their time selling an idea up the chain and navigating bureaucracy. Intuit even invested in building internal systems for rapid experimentation within TurboTax itself, enabling hundreds of A/B tests per tax season across millions of users. They built the capability to learn fast.
That's fascinating. The idea of small batches seems crucial here, too, for enabling that rapid experimentation. And that didn't start in software, did it? It comes from manufacturing.
No, not at all. It's a core principle of the Toyota production system, lean manufacturing. Small machines, rapid changeover times between different products, allowing them to produce a greater variety in small batches efficiently, rather than huge runs of one thing.
And the and-on cord concept.
Yeah, the end-on cord, any worker can pull it to stop the entire assembly line if they spot a quality problem. The idea is to address the problem immediately, in that small batch, find the root cause, fix it, before it gets replicated hundreds or thousands of times down the line. It builds quality in.
How does that small batch principle apply outside manufacturing, say to physical products or even something like education?
Well, for physical products, the book mentions companies like SGW, Silicon Garden Works, using modern tools like 3D CAD and CNC machining for rapid prototyping. They could deliver physical prototypes in just 3 days and initial production units in 3.5 weeks. That's rapid, small batch iteration for hardware, allowing much faster learning cycles.
Wow, 3 days for a physical prototype.
Yeah. And in education, there's an example of a system called School of One, which enabled teachers to experiment with different curriculum sequences or teaching methods for small groups of students, see the impact on learning almost immediately, and adjust, rather than waiting a whole semester or a year to see if a new curriculum worked. Small batches, faster feedback.
This really contrasts sharply with what Ries calls the large batch death spiral. Like that example of a product designer spending months working in isolation on 30 detailed drawings before getting any feedback at all.
Exactly. That designer might be incredibly efficient in their silo, finishing all 30 drawings perfectly according to spec. That's functional efficiency. But the large batch size means problems like the customer doesn't actually like the fundamental design direction are only discovered months later after huge amounts of work have been done.
Leading to massive rework, delays, blame, frustration. Sounds familiar.
Totally. It's a classic push system. Work is pushed through functional silos based on forecasts or plans. Lean startups instead use a pull system.
A pull system? Pulled by what? Demand?
Pulled by the hypothesis about the customer. Work is initiated specifically to test a hypothesis, to answer a question, to generate validated learning. This ensures that effort is always focused on learning what needs to be built, not just producing output that might end up being waste.
So the hypothesis drives the work, like Alphabet Energy, mentioned for their waste heat to electricity tech.
Yeah, they could go from concept to a physical prototype ready for real-world testing in just weeks using this hypothesis pull approach, testing the riskiest technical and market assumptions incredibly quickly.
Another tool mentioned for digging into problems exposed during this process is the 5 whys. Sounds simple, just asking why 5 times.
It sounds simple, but it's a powerful root cause analysis technique. You ask why repeatedly, maybe not always exactly 5 times, but until you get past the immediate technical symptom and uncover a deeper process or human issue.
Like Taiki Ono's classic Toyota example. The machine stopped.
Right. Machine stopped. Why? Fuse blew. Why? Pump overloaded. Why? Shaft wasn't lubricated. Why? No strainer on the oil pump to catch metal filings. Why? The strainer was removed during maintenance and not replaced because the standard work procedure wasn't clear or wasn't followed. It moves from a technical symptom, fuse, to a systemic process issue, maintenance procedure.
Got it. And applying that in a startup context, like at IMVU.
Ries gives examples from IMVU, like a feature gets disabled unexpectedly, why? A server crashed, why? A specific subsystem failed, why? An untrained new engineer deployed code that caused the failure, why? Their manager was too busy with other things to ensure proper training and deployment checks were done.
So a technical problem reveals a man-meter training gap.
Exactly. Or another one from IGN, API errors spiking, why? An incompatible software library, a gem, was added, why? Developers were adding libraries directly to production servers without thorough testing, why? They were doing risky production work late on Friday nights to meet deadlines. Again, a technical issue points to a process or cultural problem.
So the point isn't just about fixing the immediate bug, the symptom, but digging down to fix the underlying process or system that allowed the bug to happen in the first place.
Precisely. And then making a proportional investment to fix that root cause. A small fix for a minor, infrequent issue, a larger systemic fix, like better training or automated testing, for a major recurring problem. Appointing a 5 whys master for each incident helps ensure the process is followed rigorously and that preventative measures are actually implemented, not just talked about.
The QuickBooks story you mentioned earlier really seems to bring many of these organizational change points together, doesn't it? The pain of the old way versus the benefit of the new.
It's a really powerful case study from within Intuit. Their big 18-month waterfall project to rebuild QuickBooks was a classic achieved failure.
Built perfectly to spec, on time, on budget.
Yep. But the end product, while technically correct according to the plan, just wasn't good for users. It didn't meet their needs well. They learned the hard way that just executing a plan wasn't enough.
So what happened then? How did they change?
In year 3, they fundamentally changed their approach. They essentially tossed the old waterfall process. They invested heavily in technology that enabled smaller batches and faster feedback loops, things like virtualization for rapid automated testing environments.
Technology enabling the process change.
Exactly. And they started bringing customers into the development process much earlier and more often, using things like idea jams, code jams, solution jams, getting that direct feedback constantly.
And that led to, what was the outcome?
Much higher customer satisfaction scores and, ultimately, better sales. It allowed them to shift towards more frequent, smaller releases, continuously learning and improving based on real user behavior and feedback, rather than betting everything on one massive launch based on year-old assumptions.
So the work of innovation is never truly finished, even after you achieve some success. You can't just rest on your laurels.
No, absolutely not. Successful companies, the book argues, have to constantly find new sources of growth, new engines. They face the challenge of balancing the need to optimize their current successful engine, operational excellence, with the need to search for the next one, disruptive innovation. It's an ongoing juggling act.
And for those entrepreneurs trying to build the next engine inside big companies, creating that island of freedom, the scarce but secure resources, the independent authority, maybe some personal stake in the outcome like SnapTax had,
Yeah.
seems absolutely critical to nurturing that continuous innovation.
It really does. It creates the necessary sandbox, protecting the fragile new initiative from the weight, processes, and sometimes antibodies of the larger organization, allowing it to iterate rapidly, learn from small batches, and find its footing before being subjected to the full organizational scrutiny.
Ultimately, this whole lean startup approach requires a fundamental shift in mindset, doesn't it? Moving away from that deep-seated belief in traditional planning and forecasting as the primary source of business success, especially under uncertainty.
It absolutely does. It's often the biggest hurdle. The lean startup forces you to constantly ask the question, should this be built? Not just can it be built?
That's a key distinction.
Yeah. In a world where technology allows us to build almost anything we can imagine, our future success depends less on our sheer ability to execute a predefined plan and much more on the quality of our imagination, coupled with our rigorous ability to test those ideas against reality quickly and efficiently.
Which brings us back full circle to where we started, that massive waste of human potential when new products and ventures fail. Ries has that strong quote, calling it a criminally negligent waste.
Yeah, human creativity and potential. And he attributes that waste, fundamentally, to companies getting really good, really efficient at doing the wrong things. They are productive by traditional management metrics, hitting deadlines, staying on budget, but they're building products or services nobody actually wants or values sufficiently.
So to wrap this deep dive up, the lean startup essentially provides a scientific framework, a methodology, for managing innovation under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Right. It puts validated learning proven by customer behavior, right at the center as the true measure of progress.
It's all about accelerating that build, measure, learn feedback loop
Using tools like MVPs.
and relying on actionable metrics, not vanity metrics, to guide your decisions.
Making those critical pivot or persevere choices based on real data, constantly testing your core hypotheses about what creates value for customers and how you can reach them sustainably.
It really demands a commitment to continuous iteration and adaptation.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process.
A constant cycle of testing, learning, and deciding what to do next based on that learning.
And the real takeaway for you listening right now is that these aren't just abstract concepts for Silicon Valley techies. Whether you're launching something new inside a large corporation, trying a new program or initiative in a nonprofit, or maybe even starting something from scratch in your garage, these tools, thinking in terms of minimum viable products, running A/B tests, focusing on innovation accounting and actionable metrics, working in small batches, using the 5 whys to find root causes, these can help you learn faster, reduce wasted effort, and dramatically increase your odds of finding something that actually works in the real world.
It really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From trying to perfectly execute a plan to build the right thing, towards a more humble, experimental process of finding the right thing to build through systematic discovery and learning. It forces you to rethink what productivity even means when you're dealing with the unknown.
Yeah, productivity isn't just output, it's validated learning. And thinking about finding the right thing to build and improving success rates on a larger scale, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? If truly implementing these ideas widely requires changes not just in how individual teams or companies operate, but maybe in the broader ecosystem that surrounds innovation.
Like how?
Well, perhaps even rethinking how financial markets and investors evaluate and support innovation, especially for the long term. Maybe exploring new structures entirely, like Ries himself later proposed with the long-term stock exchange idea. It leaves you contemplating how we might need to adapt our larger systems, maybe even aspects of society itself, to better foster more effective, less wasteful innovation well into the future.